sometimes these companies, it's almost like raising children. They grow, they become teenagers at some point, and they don't need you anymore. And so it's both a sense of, it's a bittersweet moment basically. It's a sense of pride, and at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, I'm actually not required anymore. I'll talk about this actually later on. I've been in B2B SaaS all my life, and for me, now I have a sort of a template when it comes to a B2B SaaS company. I think of them as going through kind of 4 stages: planning, discovery, scaling, and steady state. So yeah, by the time they reach steady state, the value that I add might be incremental or marginal.
Welcome to Prime Venture Partners Podcast, a podcast for entrepreneurs looking to build and grow their startups. Learn about uncommon strategies and common traps from makers and doers of startup ecosystem.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Prime Venture Partners Startup Podcast. This is Sanjay Swamy here, and I'm really excited to have with me one of the silently but amazingly successful entrepreneurs from the Indian startup ecosystem, Bhavin Turakhia. Bhavin, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Sanjay. Super excited to be here. Appreciate your kind words.
So, Bhavin, it's our pleasure to have you. And we've read from time to time about several of the startups that you've started and exited, and now are, I would say, no longer a serial entrepreneur, but perhaps a parallel entrepreneur, since you're doing multiple things. Walk us through a little bit about, your early days, what got you into entrepreneurship, and your journey to date.
Sure, Sanjay. So, I guess I was fortunate to find my passion early on. I started coding when I was 10 years old. A lot of the things that, a lot of the outcomes that I've achieved today, I would give a lot of credit to my father. He actually instilled a habit of reading a lot early on in life for both me and my brother. So we used to consume, like, devour books, which we still do even today, but we used to devour books back in the day. And this was 6th grade. I was living in Mumbai in Adya Vidya Mandir, Bandra was my school, an ICSE school, and they just added computer science to their curriculum in 1989. Brought in the first computer room. This time when computers were green-colored monochrome terminals with no hard drives, those 5 1/4 inch floppy drives with 360 KB memory. No internet, no Windows. It's just sort of MS-DOS, C++, GW Basic kind of time frame. So 8086 microprocessors. And I took to it like a fish takes to water. Like I would spend all of my time, lunch breaks, short breaks, time after school. So we couldn't afford a computer back at home until I got to 8th grade. And so I would spend every day, 4 p.m. school would end. I would spend 2 hours every day after school till 6 p.m. and then I still remember the 222 bus from Bhava Hospital back all the way from Bandra to Andheri to get back home. And during this time, I went through 30, 40 different books, did lots of programming and coding. And so in many ways, I was very clear by then that I have to do something in computer science. And also very clear that I want to do something on my own. This was like, this entrepreneurship bug existed since I was 10 years old. I think a chunk of it is because of my father. One of the things that stuck with me, and I think has actually also been instrumental for my success, is that my dad would always keep telling us that, you can achieve anything you set your mind to. So that's become like a fundamental belief system. And then I read tons of biographies, biographies on Microsoft, Apple. I've read more than 6 or 7 biographies on Microsoft, 2 on Apple, IBM, Intel, Oracle, Xerox, McDonald's, Chrysler, like lots of books on entrepreneurs. Well, successful entrepreneurs and failed entrepreneurs. And so it really excited me. And I decided I want to do something on my own and something in computer science. That's how the kind of, idea germinated, or at least the passion germinated in some ways. Started my first company, me and my younger brother, we borrowed 25,000 rupees from dad and started DirectEye. And so bought our first servers. Before this, I'd done a bunch of products that didn't succeed, and then kind of launched this web hosting and domain registration company. And we started selling domain names and hosting to a global audience very shortly. So started from India, and then, globally, the internet had already sort of arrived in the country in 94. So this was already 3 years after the internet had come in. VSNL used to sell those shell and TCP IP accounts back in the day for 15,000 rupees subscription fees. And so the internet was starting to proliferate, and we decided to start DirectEye as a web presence company.
So this is 1997 you're talking about?
This is 97, 98, basically. 98
and remind us again how old you and your brother were at the time.
So I was 17, he was 15, basically 2 years younger to me.
Wow.
And that company grew, and then, we owned and operated that for about 16 years. Well, actually, Div then started, and I'll talk about that, Media.net along the way. And I continued sort of running Direct Eye, and then started the subsequent companies, Radix, Flock, and Zeta. So we then sold that in 2014 and $160 million exit to a public company called Endurance. But ran it and became the 4th largest domain registrar and hosting company in the world. By the time we sold in 2014, we had about 10 million domain names registered on our platform, several million websites hosted on our platform, and customers in every country and continent, including I think there was some domain registered through some who is information in Antarctica also. So pretty much every sort of every sort of country and location in the world, I think, in for the most parts.
Sorry, but that was still a 15 to 17-year journey.
Yes, it was so I actually continued really actively involved in the company until 2008, 2009. I was running the entire show. Around that time, I brought in bunch of senior management. So there were 3 sort of, businesses, and there were 3 business heads, Research Club, Logicbox, and Big Rock. That were being managed by respective business heads, and then I was sort of, working with them strategically. And then in 2010, I already started working on my business plan for Radix, which is the next company that I founded, that launched in 2012. So Radix is basically in the new GTLD space. We're a new GTLD registry. We're now the largest new GTLD registry by market share. What that means is that before 2012, when you register a domain name on the internet, you could only register it in com, net, org, bizinfo. There were like a few extensions or country codes like .in, .us, etc. Right. In 2012, ICANN, which governs the entire internet, came up with this process of allowing companies to apply for strings that become registries, and people can register domain names within them. So I applied for 31 different strings. We won, so they were all auctioned. If there were multiple applicants, we won about 9 of them. And so today we operate .online, .website, .site, .tech, .store, .space, and like a few others. I have a CEO currently that runs the business. So originally I started off with a small team and invested about $25 million into it. Now the company is doing, I think, close to $20 million in EBITDA, growing at about 60% year on year, valued at about $500 million, $400 million plus dollars. And so it's grown quite a bit organically, and it's a pretty successful business, thanks to the amazing team. So I have Sandeep is the CEO along with a team of about 70 people that does an outstanding job. It's kind of, sometimes these companies, it's almost like raising children. They grow, they become teenagers at some point and they don't need you anymore. And so it's both a sense of, it's a bittersweet moment, basically. It's a sense of pride. And at the same time, it's like, oh yeah, I'm actually not required anymore. I'll talk about this actually later on. So I have this notion of, how I've been in B2B SaaS all my life. And for me, now I have a sort of a template when it comes to a B2B SaaS company. I think of them as going through kind of 4 stages: planning, discovery, scaling, and steady state. So yeah, by the time they reach steady state, the value that I add might be incremental or marginal, but I have an amazing team running the show there. So by 2010, I had started that company, planning for that company, and it launched in 2012. Then 2014, I started Flock, and Flock now actually comprises of 2 products. There's a product called Titan, which is even more successful, in fact, and Flock. Flock is a messenger product that competes with Slack and Microsoft Teams. And Titan, which is our email product, it competes with Outlook and G Suite and Gmail. So basically, we offer business mail offering, mail, calendar, contacts, and then Messenger sort of adds on. So it's like a suite of business communication collaboration products. And so those 2 germinated in somewhere in 2013, 2014 as a pivot from some earlier work that I was doing to try and build a consumer chat application. So it kind of pivoted into this enterprise collaboration play. And then lastly, in 2015, I started Zeta along with Ramki. So Ramki was working with me jointly as a engineering head and lead and CTO for many of my products, and we worked together for about 10 years. And then we're both passionate about payments. So in 2014, we spent quite a bit of time really thinking about how we can disrupt banking, payments, and commerce around the world. We found our sort of, groove after a year of homework. And that's the planning phase, as I call it. Basically, we did a year of homework and planning. 2010 to 2012 was a planning phase for Radix. So again, lots of homework and planning, basically. And so we did a year of homework planning, decided which path we want to take, and then started Zeta. Zeta is a modern banking tech company. We essentially provide two products, Tachyon and Fusion, or two suites. Tachyon basically is a modern core banking, transaction processing, payments, and mobile app platform for banks. So it's a bank in a box that enables a bank to launch any retail or commercial product for end consumers and companies, and provide a modern neo-banking experience and increase their income, reduce their costs, etc. Fully cloud native, fully built on modern tech, API ready, and so on and so forth. The second product, which is Fusion, is what we call our embeddable banking suite. And it enables fintechs and distributors to embed prepaid, credit, loans, debit products inside their apps and experiences. So build payments and banking products, embed them inside their apps and experiences. So those are the two areas. We're predominantly playing the role of a technology service provider, though sometimes we go above and beyond and help in customer support, operations, and program management. But we predominantly play the role of a technology service provider to banks and fintechs and distributors. And that's basically Zeta. Zeta so far is the only company I've actually raised external funding for. Every other company has either been self-invested. I've put in a ton of my capital into both Flock and Zeta, actually, in the Flock, Titan, and Zeta in the early days, and Radix, $25 million of my personal capital. But with Zeta, we did a small minority round a couple of years ago with a strategic. So yeah, that brings you up to speed with my entire history and background.
Fascinating, and it's amazing that you're doing so much of this in parallel and taking on like really large problems, right? And obviously you have a track record of taking them all the way through to very large outcomes. And you talked about the 4 phases, right? Planning, discovery, scaling, and then I guess steady state. Or can you deep dive a little bit more into each of these 4, right? And how you think about them, and what are the sort of exit criteria to go from one phase to the other, and which is sort of the thing that most startups struggle with, right? Where are we in this journey? Would love to hear how you think about it, and with some examples would be great.
Absolutely, I love this question, and I love that you mentioned exit criteria, because I can tell you by now, and it's the luxury of having screwed up so many times that I can that I can discuss and present frameworks, etc. But yes, it's very important to understand what the gating criteria for each next phase is, because many times failure is entirely a function of scaling too soon before you finish discovery, or starting discovery too soon before you finish planning, and so on and so forth. And this is a conventionally, conventional mistake from which I have made enough number of times. So I'll talk about each of these stages. So planning, the goal of planning is, do I want to enter into this business, or do I want to build this product? The end outcome or the answer to it is yes, I want to go ahead, right? Until planning is completed, I will not hire people, except have a small team of people, so which is what we did in Radix. In case of Zeta, it was just me and Ramki, but have a small team of people whose goal is to work with me to do planning, but not actually building. And so we might talk to customers, we might do some tiny amounts of building here and there, but it's the answer to the outcome of that stage, or deliverable of that stage, is, do we want to enter into this business, or do we want to build this product? The outcome of the discovery stage is that we had a hypothesis and we decided we want to go ahead with it. Is it going to succeed in the market? Do we actually have a traction channel, and do we have a product market fit? And I'll talk about the deliverables there in more granular detail. If you do have both of those, then the scaling stage, the answer is that, okay, now I have a product and a business that makes sense, and I have a go-to-market strategy. Can I actually scale this? Can I 10x it, or 100x it, or 1000x it, basically? And what do I need the ingredients to sort of get that done? By the time you get to steady state, the deliverables, and that's the longest stage, I guess, in any company's history, is the deliverables are build the right moats to make sure the business continues to be sustainable, optimize profitability, do succession planning, and bring in the right leadership, and ensure that the company can sustain and survive. So that's the way I think of all 4 phases, right? In the planning stage, this answer is going to take a little bit of time, but I want to sort of make sure that I give it justice. In the planning stage, I'm really trying to answer 6 questions. And so I think of them as persona, problem, product, go-to-market, revenue, and moat. So to me, these 6 are the necessary and sufficient ingredients of a successful business plan. As long as you have validated these 6 and you validate them to a significant extent in planning, and then you're further validating them in discovery by actual implementation. When you validate the 6, you've basically got a business, right? So my perspective at that point is, I have a, like, take Zeta for instance. I have a notion I want to do something in payments and banking. That's very ephemeral. But now I have to decide, do I want to be a bank and sell to customers? Do I want to be a technology service provider and sell to banks? If I'm selling to banks, what size? Am I looking at enterprise banks? Am I looking at small banks? Am I looking at all banks, basically? What is the problem that I'm trying to solve for them? So I need to identify a persona. I need to identify a deep problem that that persona is facing. And I need to identify, therefore, the definition of my product. And there's a very important rule out here that my product must be the benefit that my product provides for that particular problem that we're solving for, must be at least a multiple magnitude, 10x of what the existing conventional solutions might be. Can't be a 20% incremental improvement or a 30% incremental improvement, because customers are not going to shift their existing sort of products, shift from existing solutions to new solutions, unless there is a multiplier, a magnitude or difference in terms of incremental improvement. So I need to hone in on my persona, understand deeply the problem space, and understand why my product is 10x better than existing solutions. Now, it's not enough to have a great product. How am I going to reach the market? That's my go-to-market strategy. I should have at least a hypothesis of the first few traction channels that are going to work. How am I going to make revenue? I know in many cases with startups, it tends to be fashionable to not make revenue, but I've always focused on understanding early on. I might be wrong, and many times I'm wrong, and a completely different revenue stream opens up. That's okay. But in the planning stage, I need to have a strong hypothesis on how am I going to end up making revenue. And the last thing is that after I build this business, what's my protection of creating a sustainable business? Is it an easily replicable business? And there could be different modes. Is capital my mode? Do I have to keep pumping in a lot of capital? Is brand my mode? Is data my mode? Is network effect my mode? Is technology my mode? What are the combinations that I can use to create a sustainable business that I protect? So that's at the end of my planning stage, I should have a reasonably fair idea. They're all hypotheses, but reasonably fair hypothesis that I've validated through conversations, through random tiny builds, through research, etc., through primary and secondary research. I've validated these 6 elements, and then the business opportunity is attractive because I've done a revenue modeling saying that, oh, this is a $1 billion business opportunity, or this is and revenues and valuation is an after effect. But in terms of scale, can I make a large enough impact? Each subsequent business that I've started, my ambition has been larger in order to sort of, give justice to, I guess, my potential. So that's my deliverable for the planning stage.
Actually, and I just interrupt here, but the point you make about the planning stage, now that for me the shoe's on the other foot and I'm more on the venture capital side and the investor side of it, that you almost entirely defined our business evaluation process as well. It's exactly how we look at it from that perspective, right? In terms of the target customer, the problem that we're solving, is it worth solving? Is it big enough? What's the value proposition there? What's the moat this company's got? Is it 10x better than the state of the union? And can they build moats along the way? Is the moat distribution? Is the moat product? Is the moat technology? So very nice to hear you sort of say that, because that's exactly what we are also looking for. And I think entrepreneurs also should be looking. It's a great framework that you provided for them. So
absolutely, and the reason is the same, because you and me are evaluating from the same standpoint, which is that, well, actually, in my case, it's both. I'm wearing a VC hat because I'm putting in my own capital. But really speaking, if you think about it, you as a fund are investing money. The entrepreneur is investing a non-replenishable resource, which is his time. Both are investments. So you only want to invest both of those if you have a validated business plan. Otherwise, there's no point in investing both those resources, I guess. So yes, the evaluation should be the same as an entrepreneur hat or a VC hat. I'm wearing both hats, so for me it becomes even more critical. But I guess the evaluation is identical. Once you've gotten past that notion of, yes, I want to do this business, I want to engage in this business, at the discovery stage, it's basically product market fit and one GTM traction channel that can scale with LTV greater than CAC. This is my deliverable formula, let's say. So product market fit in turn has, well, 3 objective measures. So I have a hypothesis and a problem. I'm going to build a quick product and keep thin slicing and building additional thin slices, etc., to get to product market fit. And product market fit has three objective measures: a high net promoter score, which means people want to use and love my product so much that they will recommend it to other people; a high asymptotic retention curve. So I could get 100 people in at the top of the funnel, and I might lose 60, 70, 80, but our 20 people that remain continue to remain in perpetuity. They keep using my product 8th week, 16th week, 32nd week. It's adding enough value because then that 20 set will become my honed in persona from the initial persona that I started out, that these people find my product so useful that I can actually, that they actually continue to retain. The third framework that I found really useful is, and we're starting out this, as experimentation now on new products, is, with that set of customers, ask them a question that if I took this product away from you, would you be very disappointed? Would you be disappointed? Would you be, would you not care? And our goal should be to get to a very disappointed score of 40%. So out of the people that are using my product on an ongoing basis, 40% of them should be extremely disappointed if I took the product away. If I've achieved these three, and these are all three measurable numbers, so if I achieve these three, we know we've got product market fit. Now that by itself is not enough. We also need because I've honed in my persona. So out of the top of the funnel, I've decided, okay, I decided I want to build an email product, for generals, employed professionals. When I went in there, I found out that sales professionals actually really love my product and stick to it. Okay, now I know I have a slightly narrower persona than what I started with, but they validate all my three criteria of high net promoter score, high retention, and they'd be very disappointed if I took the product away. Now, do I have a traction channel of being able to get as many possible target segment of this persona, target audience of this persona at a cost of acquisition that's lower than the lifetime value that I can get from them? So again, two simple formulas. Lifetime value is my revenue discounted cash flow per customer down to today's net present value. My CAC is whatever my cost of acquisition is for that customer. As long as I can get to product market fit and get at least one traction channel where LTV is greater than CAC. And for me, these days I answer a third question, which is that, is it big enough? Because I might find in the discovery stage that my hypothesis was I will sell this software to every bank. Turns out that only the smallest of the banks, are going to, be able to sort of benefit from my product to the extent that I want them to. And so actually, this is not a massive opportunity, small opportunity. I might choose to discard in favor of something else. But at least the first two, PMF and LTV greater than CAC with one traction channel at scale, that gives me a grading criteria to enter into scaling. At scaling, you bring in GTM people, you bring in the right leadership, you pump in capital, predominantly to try and exhaust as much of that one traction channel you found, and find similarly now 2 or 3 other traction channels that you can keep adding to keep getting more and more customers. And then post that, you basically get the steady state. So that's the entire series of, well, at least a B2B SaaS business journey. Potentially applies to B2C also. Same logic.
Yeah, I think maybe some aspects of the business model might be slightly unclear, but you're right. It broadly applies there as well. And of course, we didn't talk about the scaling and the steady state phase. We'll come back to that perhaps later. But as you build these companies out, and you've seen multiple journeys and obviously at different stages in life. So recently you said you did look at, you did bring in some external capital in the case of Zeta from a strategic partner. And of course, I guess you've built up this ability to invest in your own businesses, but at least all the new businesses are taking in a fair amount of capital relatively early in their lives. So generally, what are your thoughts around guiding entrepreneurs on, fundraising? When is the right time for them to fundraise? Not everybody has the, I guess, the staying power or the luxury of, self-funding, right? So, what are your thoughts, in terms of when is the right timing for external capital?
No, absolutely. I think
and the type of external capital as well. Yeah.
I think I have nothing against fundraising. I think fundraising is actually a critical requirement for any business to grow and sustain. In effect, as I said, I wear both my hats, right? I'm also fundraising for myself, from myself. That's an investor hat. And then, owning and operating the business. I think the biggest mistakes that people make in fundraising is not to fundraise for a specific purpose, right? The way I see it is, in effect, these phases also help, which is that seed stage funding is entirely intended for covering the planning stage. Whether it's 1 or more cycles, you should only have to raise a small amount of capital, that's your seed capital, to cover the planning stage. Your series A should essentially cover the discovery phase. And then every subsequent raise that you have should cover your growth phase, basically. And so you're typically raising capital for either your planning stage, your discovery stage, or your scaling stage. By the time you get to steady state, hopefully you shouldn't need to raise capital. period. Potentially in the scaling stage, also depending on your months to payback and your LTV to CAC ratio, you may get out of the continuously having to raise capital phase also soon enough, basically. So these are all sort of possibilities, right? But you definitely need capital for discovery and planning and discovery. And in my case, I was fortunate enough to be able to leverage past successes to pump in the capital for both of those. And with the focus of revenue early on, we also got to a stage where even scaling stage in many cases didn't require sort of capital. In some cases they do, which is kind of what brings me to my sort of Zeta's fundraise. I guess multitude of reasons there also, which is that Zeta is amongst my most ambitious plans and business plans till date. We have a huge, the upside is uncapped, the TAM is uncapped in terms of what our market potential is. Our ability to deliver to that is also extremely, it's amazing in terms of what the team, my co-founder is an outstanding person. Huge respect for him. It's what two of us together can do in terms of delivering against this, vision of really disrupting banking with what we call a neo stack, modern banking stack, and disrupting embeddable banking is huge. The opportunity is huge. And so in that regards, we are actually for some of the, and so Zeta, by the way, further is also a multitude of companies. So within Zeta, or multitude of businesses or products, whichever way you want to think of them. So within Zeta, there are products that are in the planning stage, there are products in the discovery stage, there are products in the scaling stage right now, right? They're all, nothing is in the steady state stage. They're all in these three stages. And so, given, and I've personally invested now slightly more than $40 million into Zeta of my personal capital. Ramki's put in a bunch of his personal capital. And so at some point, I guess it was a function of, we definitely need more capital for scaling. So we're going to continue. And I'd be happy to keep pumping in, by the way. I have no concerns. I have high conviction. But there's a notion of not putting all my eggs in one basket. There's a notion of bringing in external smart capital or strategic capital that could actually accelerate the journey for us. So that's the fourth reason for raising capital, which is strategic partnerships, right? So in our case, the capital we raised was from our strategic partner, Sodexo. We have, again, huge respect for the company they've built. It's a massive global organization, and this partnership came not just with capital, but with also a contract between us, where we are actually enabling them and empowering them globally through our technology, and vice versa. They're taking our technology to multiple countries around the world, including India. And so by virtue of that, actually, to be honest, the value of that deal and our relationship and how it made us stronger was actually much higher than the value of the capital that they put in also. Right. But it kind of became a strategic overall deal. So that's the other reason. And it made logical sense to then take some money from outside, as well as kind of, as well as benefit from this deal. So I would say, as long as, people have a clear purpose in mind, a clear outcome in mind, and they're raising for that, I think there's no problem. I feel that there's two concerns I have in fundraising, and those then morph into multiple other concerns, the side effects of those concerns, which is either you're in this constant sort of raising equation with no focus ever on revenue and profitability. And purely, I've seen this journey play out during the time in the sort of late 90s, early 2000, when people used to chase eyeballs. It's kind of, manifesting itself, once again in some form or the other, with no real sort of, line of sight on a tangible persona, problem statement, etc. Like, for instance, one of the things that I will never ever do, and I tell my people I'm strictly against, is paying people to use my product. Like, this whole notion of perpetual cashbacks and burning capital to sort of acquire customers is it actually postpones product market fit by such a huge degree, because if you pay your customers to use your product, you never realize whether you have product market fit, whether they're truly using you for the value that you're generating, or are they using you because they have incentives to use your products, right? Like, every consumer company today is giving discounted, pricing on like, if somebody's going to give me my meal at 20% lesser than what it would cost me to buy it from the restaurant, sure, I'll buy it from, your app. But am I buying it because your app actually is adding value, or because of discount? That's always questionable, right? So I think some of these.
So you're saying you risk getting these false positives, and it becomes
you're in that false positive cycle for years, for decades in some cases. Basically, you don't know you have a moat, you don't know you have product market fit, you don't know you have a high net promoter score, and all of those are false signals from your incentivization processes, basically. So I strongly believe in, I will spend 3 times more money in building the right product than I would in burning cash to get people to use my product, right? So to me, that's a very clear principle, basically. But yeah, so raising funding for the sake of raising funding without a purpose in mind, raising funding purely for distributing that money amongst customers, not having a focus on getting to product market fit and creating a true purpose of a product. There are some, without naming names, there are some products in the country today. I can't even point. Nobody can point, including the people themselves, can point and tell you what is the core purpose of that product. This is the other thing. I don't believe in the notion of super apps, except in China. Your business or product should have it. If I'm a user, I buy a Ferrari because it's the fastest car. I buy a Tesla because it's an electronic car. They stand for a particular purpose and a problem they're trying to solve. Most products in India, like everything in the kitchen sink, everybody has a wallet, everybody has a prepaid card, everybody has e-commerce, it's just, everybody has insurance, everybody has investment, everybody has wealth management. Like suddenly you now have this product that does everything averagely, but doesn't do one thing well. And so that to me is not product market fit. That's you trying to still find product market fit, because if you couldn't make money from 10 things, the 11th thing is not going to make you money. You have to figure out how to make money from the first thing or discard it, basically. And so that's my perspective, which is capital for the sake of, people have burned. This is the other formula, right? I'm concerned that many companies have burned billions of dollars trying to find product market fit, which to me is ridiculous. I've burnt money trying to find product market fit, by the way, and I've pumped in a chunk of my capital in completely wrong ideas and hypotheses. But the expectation is that a typical seed stage should cost you in the hundreds of thousands to a couple of million, and the Series A should cost you a couple of million to tens of millions. And by that time, you should have clear product market fit with a potential future revenue line. It might not be immediate, revenue line. But if you're constantly spending billions of dollars or hundreds of millions of dollars and you still haven't found product market fit, that to me is a wastage of capital. So yeah, those are my sort of perspectives on fundraise and the right use of capital in the right way.
Amazing insights, Bhavin. I mean, personally, we at Prime resonate with a lot of what you're saying, right? I think putting good money behind bad is just always a bad idea. And, totally fine with companies saying, look, this is not working, we're going to try something else and so on. But, adding something, incrementally without, 100% laser focused, right? I think startups win because they do one thing really, really well. And if they've not found that success, then find something else, and that's okay. But trying to add something, as you said, average on top of something average is just never a great idea for a startup. So the fabulous insights. So switching gears a little bit, I've heard that I would never know in which apartment of yours you are because all your apartments look identical. Is that a fable? Is that a myth, or is that reality? I mean, you told me you're now in London, but I heard you could be in Dubai or Mumbai and would look exactly the same. Just curious.
So you probably know on video because the background is different, the room that I operate in is different. But I am a stickler for productivity and efficiency, and I have an identical setup everywhere. So I have 3 monitors here. I have a standing desk. I have a chair cushion, a keyboard, mouse, docking station. The entire setup exactly as it is replicated in all 4 apartments: New York, Dubai, Mumbai, and here London. It's replicated in my offices, and in fact, recently, plus before COVID, for about a year and a half, 2 years, when I was coming into Mumbai, I actually was operating from a hotel because my house is under refurbishment. So take a service apartment I only would spend about 3 days in Mumbai, 3 days in Bangalore. But again, for those 3 days, a day before my arrival, my team will actually set everything up exactly the way they want it. And there's a document which prescribes even like the angles of the monitors. I'm a bit of a bit OCD when it comes to sort of some of these things, basically, like so how they should be placed on the table, and everything else is exactly identical in every one of these places. So yes, in that respect,
very interesting. So tell us a little bit about, we'll come back to startups and entrepreneurship in a second, but outside of that, right? You're running 3 companies in parallel right now, and all are in fairly serious phases of, I would say, scale up, and a substantial amount of personal capital at stake, as well as a lot of these are sort of building on the back of your time and your reputation, and people have joined you and other teams working with you. How do you find time for yourself and personal time, family, things like that? The reason entrepreneurs struggle with this, right? I mean, they're doing one thing, but they sort of struggle, and I frankly as a VC also I tend to struggle. So just curious as to
I guess I can talk about a couple of things. I mean, firstly, I don't have personal family in the sense that I have my younger brother, we're very, very close. I have mom and dad who instrumental for everything that I am in life, and I close to them, etc., but not very time consuming. So I don't have children, for instance, that I have to take care of. Not married, so I don't have some of those responsibilities. Future, we'll see what comes, but as of today, pretty much all my time is dedicated towards, I guess, my babies, which is sort of Zeta, Flock, and Radix. Zeta, Flock, Titan, and Radix. Radix, I will say, and I mentioned this before, there was a point in time until 2013, 2014, I had a high amount of involvement. By the time I got to 2016, it kept reducing. Post 2016, 2017, it takes up less than 5% of my time today. Sandeep Ramchandani, who's the CEO, and his team under him, Neha, Suman, like he's got a brilliant team under him, and they are outstanding. So I actually have to spend very little time. In fact, if anything, I get pulled in and I can give strategic contribution that helps based on my experience, etc. But normal day-to-day business that it's actually towards the that business is towards the latter half of scaling and is pretty soon moving into steady state. In a couple of years, it'll get there basically. So it's actually two companies, right? Zeta on one side and Titan and Flock on the other side. That's where I spend, most of my time or all my time. It's about 50-50. Some weeks it's, more here, some weeks it's more there. Zeta actually does take up a little more. So I would say that, probably a higher chunk goes into Zeta of late than Flock and Titan. But nonetheless, that's where I spend most of my time. And I would say that, so work-wise, because you asked that question, I'm blessed to have, again, an amazing team in both places that takes a lot of the burden. I think there's one thing that I get proud about is I've been very, very consistently, very, very sort of focused on hiring the best talent, bringing in the best people, as co-creators along with me. So that's always helped. So that's one, reason why. I guess I do end up saving a ton of my time, both because I don't have some other responsibilities. I think I've seen this, and I obviously did this with Zeta, and we have engaged in a couple of sort of M&A/funding cycle discussions, but not having to constantly be in the mode where you're raising one round and the next round, etc., also at least saves 30% time. I think founders have to end up spending about 30% of the time on constant fundraising. I haven't had to do that, so I guess that's an extra 30% that I saved. So I think those are things that enable me to deliver on, well, I guess, multiple companies at the same time. An amazing platform, an amazing team, and the fact that I save time by not having to do consistent fundraisers all the time, at least. And then over and above that, to be honest, this is my life. Like I have no desire. I don't really use the money or capital. I have some, philanthropic goals in mind in life, in the future. But for the most part, this is what keeps me most excited, most occupied. I love solving problems. I love building products. And that's really a reason why I do what I do. I strongly believe that each of us has a moral obligation to make an impact proportionate to our potential. And I believe that I still have a long way to go there. And so, yeah, I'm really happy just working away, whether it's, weekdays, weekends, all the time, for the most part. I have some hobbies. I like, adventure sports here and there. I like London's good because I can, except when the weather is really bad during, winters, etc. But otherwise, there's lots of parks you can take a walk around in. I live right next to Regent's Park and pretty close to Hyde Park, my favorite park in the city, actually. So, I can take walks in the park, do some activities here and there. That's fun for me. But otherwise, for the most part, it's Zeta, Flock, and Titan.
Amazing. I think we're close to the end of the time we had planned. I have one last question for you, which we tend to ask a lot of our podcast guests. Over the course of these 15 years, I'm sure you've seen and heard and changed a lot of things that along the way. But looking back, today, what would you advise your younger self if you were starting out again? Right? First of all, would you do the same thing? Would you do things differently? And what advice do you have for, I guess, younger entrepreneurs like your younger self?
Yeah, absolutely. Tons, actually. And I'll try and boil it down into a few most important ones. But as I said, I have, screwed up on multitude of occasions, I guess. The first thing I would say I kind of touched upon briefly is focus on value creation, not valuation. Valuation is a side effect of value creation. A lot of people end up getting caught up in this, So it's an unfortunate consequence of our industry that we celebrate valuation wins. We don't celebrate value creation wins. because they're harder to articulate. The media finds it very easy to say, hey, here's another unicorn billion-dollar valuation. But it's much harder to say, hey, here's a company that truly solved this problem for this target persona, and this is what they built. You have to spend, it is almost investigative journalism to actually write about that. Very easy to write about valuation. So unfortunately, the media ends up predominantly only celebrating valuation wins. But I would say as an entrepreneur, as a problem solver, focus on creating value, focus on creating meaningful value. Valuation will follow. The other thing is my biggest mistakes have been ideas that I had that were stupid, but I didn't bother to validate them. Build the muscle to validate fast and validate always. There's always a way. Sit and think through, and that's why that framework, as I said, if you can't very, very cleanly and clearly and with confidence, being true to yourself, sometimes that's also hard. People start believing their own sort of spiel. But by being, whilst being true to yourself, if you can clearly articulate that you do have a persona, problem, product, go to market, etc. If you do have those, 6 ingredients, then you have a business plan. Otherwise, keep validating until you have that. In the discovery phase, again, now take your hypothesis and validate them until you can prove them in the market. So build that muscle and culture in the organization to validate fast and validate always. That I think is the second one that I will talk about. This is not really an advice, but a framework and tool that I wish I had discovered 15, 18 years ago, which is OKRs. We now do everything on OKRs in our organization. It was introduced by one of my product leads, a guy called Nanad in the company. And since then I've become a fan since several years now. So we still have a long ways to go in properly adopting them. I'll say it's always a lifetime journey, but they make a meaningful difference in focus, in prioritization, in getting a line of sight, in aligning the entire organization to focus on working towards the same solution, same outcome, etc. So I think that's something I would have recommended to my, to my 20s version to sort of adopt sooner. It did make a meaningful and continues to make a meaningful difference to our organization.
So actually, OKRs at Prime is like a religion. My partner Bhavin Turakhia was at Google, and a big fan of it. And so it's mandatory reading, and we strongly encourage our founders to adopt OKRs throughout their organization. I can't say that we have been 100% successful, but we've seen the change in the efficiency and clarity of purpose in the companies that have internalized it. So absolutely with you on that.
Even companies that do it badly will still see a benefit. So you can only keep getting better at that. I have a series of training courses on OKRs, about an hour and a half worth of videos that are online on my YouTube channel, actually, that you can check out, that we use internally for everybody. So 100% of the organization joins and goes through that. It's about, because the biggest problem I've found with OKRs, actually planning to change. I mean, internally, I've been thinking that we should change the terminology. People don't understand objectives, key results, and initiatives. They're very, so people set the wrong objectives, or set the wrong key results, or half-bake them and things like that. So this is just training on how to write a good objective, how to write a good key result, what are they, why are they beneficial, and how to choose high impact initiatives. That's the way we think about initiatives, which is that you can always keep busy doing things, but it's important to actually, I'd rather do the one thing that make the biggest impact than do 10 things that made like minor impacts in the KR that we're trying to chase, basically, right? So there's a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel on that I think will make a world of a difference in internalizing how to sort of adopt OKRs, I guess. So yeah, those would be the 3 things I think that I would talk about to my younger self. I would also build the muscle to hire at a higher bar sooner. I remember very categorically, come sometime 2007, is when I really started thinking about, we're hiring good people, but I want to hire the best. So we're hiring the top 5 or 10 percentile. I would want to make it the top 1 or 2 percentile for some of the roles where it's really, really relevant. And I feel like if I had built that muscle to hire at a higher bar sooner, progress would have been faster also, I guess. Yeah, those are the, I guess, key insights or advice.
Wonderful. Bhavin, every answer of yours, I think if I was an entrepreneur starting out today and certainly even otherwise, I'd probably play it over and over again, packed with insights and really good, live examples as well. Thank you so much for being on our show. We really loved having you here. And we'll have this out on the internet soon, and certainly through our podcast. And I'm sure everybody listening to this, and particularly younger entrepreneurs, will benefit a great deal. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Sanjay. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Terrific.
Dear listeners, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. Subscribe now on your favorite podcast app for free, and you'll be the first one to know when new episodes are available. Just search for Prime Venture Partners Podcast in Apple Podcast, Spotify, Castbox, or however you get your podcasts. Then hit subscribe. And if you have enjoyed the show, we would be really grateful if you leave us a review on Apple Podcast. To read the full transcript, find the link in the show notes.